everyone, welcome back to today's video. Today is going to be a story time video for you, so let's go ahead and get started. So almost 2.5 weeks ago, we encountered an equine emergency that was a nightmare from hell. My main vet was out of town. Trying to find yet another vet was also a nightmare. While trying to find a local vet, we had ended up calling it the state university and received 2 quotes pending her official diagnosis, and that's what we're going to go through in today's video. Before we dive right into today's story time, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe if you like what you see, and go ahead and hit that notification bell to be notified anytime I post a new video. New videos are posted every Friday at 11 a.m. Eastern Standard Time, usually. So today's story time video actually starts back on July 21st. I went to catch both girls to ride that day. That was my typical day to go ride. So that's usually what I plan to do on those days. However, that day I had only ended up riding one horse, as Callie had managed to find my eject button. Thankfully, while that had happened, I was riding with one of the girls at the farm, and Callie had thankfully stopped after she had unseated me. My foot, however, ended up getting twisted and rotating within the stirrup and getting caught. I digress. Thankfully somebody was there. Thankfully my horse stopped and stood and waited for me to get up. That's a whole nother story for a different video. After that, we had come back to the barn and untacked. Because I had fallen and how I had fallen, I had smacked the back of my head pretty good. But it smacked so good that the whole front of my face hurt, like my nose especially the worst. Thankfully, my brain bucket had prevented any further injuries that may have happened. So as we were taking a break in between rides and in between horses, one of the girls had come out to the barn and said Starr had just exploded in the alleyway. And she had exploded so bad that it had actually gone up the stall wall behind her, the outside stall wall behind her. When we came in to check it out, they were in fact correct, and she did explode, and it was all water with remnants of stool in it. We went ahead and we temped her. We found she was slightly elevated. She, however, did have a normal response time on the pinch test and the gum capillary test. We had chalked it up to limited airflow in the alley, and with her still wearing her fly sheet because the bugs were horrible. I didn't want to expose her to the bugs if I didn't have to. It's already bad enough I pulled her from pasture. So we went ahead, we set her outside so we could go ahead and retemp her, and she dropped right back down into the normal range. Her hydration test, the tent, pinching test, and the capillary test came back normal as well. She was still interested in eating. She was still interested in drinking. So we went ahead and we placed her back outside that night. Monday came. We went ahead. We brought her up to eat and go ahead and retest and retemp her. Everything came back normal at that point in time. So I went ahead and put her again back outside. So Tuesday comes around. And that's when everything started to take a turn. My barn owner's daughters were out doing midday checks, and they noticed that Starr was off by herself, and she had begun looking dumpy at this point, even while out in the field. She had shown no interest in eating, and at that point they didn't see her drinking. They did see that she was just constantly dripping water at this point out her behind, and she had gone ahead and called me, and that was probably about 12:30, 1 o'clock. After I had gotten the call, I had hung up that phone call, turned around, called my boss, and I let her know I had to leave and went running out the door, as at that point it was a little bit of a drive for me to get up there, and on a good day it takes me like 40 minutes. Along the way up to the barn, I called my friend / trainer, as she's 5 minutes from the barn herself, just so we could get another set of eyes on her while I continued my drive up there. And I had also called my normal vet's office, only to find out that my main veterinarian is on vacation that week. With her being out on vacation, they recommended me to another vet. Unfortunately, that vet was a traveling vet who was teaching a clinic, and the clinic he was teaching was an hour north yet of where we were, so he wasn't able to make it. I called my friend back asking if she knew of anyone else, any other vet in the area to call. In the meantime, I had also called the state university and had told them what I knew currently, and they said that they would have the doc call me back as soon as they could. Within that time, my friend had texted me 2 numbers, so I just clicked the first number and hit call on my phone as I was still driving. The receptionist answered right away. I explained my situation, what I knew was presently going on, and asked if she was able to send the vet out to see if she could respond to the call. She had put me on hold and come back probably about 2-3 minutes later, saying that they did horses at one point, but they no longer do equines. Shortly after I had finished that call, I was pulling into the barn myself, and I was able to lay eyes on her, take her temp, do the pinch and the capillary and all this other fun stuff. Her temp was still somehow in normal range. She very much had leakage coming out of her, and it was all water, like very little remnants of stool just coming out her behind. Her pinch test at that point came back, she came back very tented, which at that point we know she's losing water. I went to feel the capillaries, and those were tacky, which is also a sign of the horse is dehydrated. By this point, the university hospital doctor had called me back. They said they had room if we couldn't find a local vet to go ahead and bring her in. They had room. If it was going to be after 5 p.m., though, I was to call and let them know again that we were on our way. They were going to let the next doctors know what was going on, the calls that they had received. Based on what I told them, without the doctor physically seeing her at that point, her guess was Potomac horse fever or colitis. Treatment at the university, they said, started at $3,000 for a 3-day stay and bags of IV fluid. They didn't specify how much, but bags of IV fluid. They did say if it was colitis, we were looking at double the cost just starting. And again, to just call and let them know if we were coming up. After speaking to the university, I was able to call the last known equine vet in the area. They said they had a doctor who was available to see her if we could get her hauled in. After speaking to the university, I was able to call the last known equine vet in the area. They said that they had a doctor to see her if we could go ahead and haul her in. My husband went to start hooking up a trailer, only for the office to quickly call us back and say that she couldn't come to the clinic due to her diarrhea symptom and the fact that they didn't know what was going on. So they didn't want to bring her in and have her potentially contaminate other equines. So after that call, she's like, let me see if there's another doc who can come to you. So she made a few calls, called me back, so that they can dispatch a doctor to us, as we were in range, but we were literally in range by a literal street. The doctor was able to get there within 45 minutes from time of dispatch. Once the doctors got there, they had done the same tests that we had already done, so the pinch test, capillary, all that fun stuff. They had also went ahead and asked me if she was up to date on vaccines. Thankfully, yes, her vaccines were given in April, and her vaccines included Potomac, which was their worry is, are we dealing with Potomac? So at this point, Potomac is one of those, and it depends on the vet that you talk to. Some vets say 2 times a year, others say 3. Like I said, their first thought was Potomac, but it went further down the list. They also thought equine fecal water syndrome, which I'd never heard of until that day. But with her being dumpy, they said that's not up there either. They also were thinking colitis. Colitis is one of those that you can't, you can, but you can't test for. I forgot what exactly she said it was, but they could test her stool. Not that there was stool to test, but they could test it and it could maybe tell them, but she said it was a 50-50 shot on if they'd get an answer or not. So they went ahead, they pulled blood for the CBC and a stall side test. Her stall side came back normal, so they were thinking that, okay, we're probably just dealing with the early signs of colitis at this point. So they went ahead, they did 5 liters of fluid on her. I had to walk away when they went to prep for that, as I've got my own issues. After running the fluids, they said, go ahead, we're going to get her set up in a stall so we can monitor her food and her water intake. But we also need to set the stall somewhere where there's not a whole lot of other horses. Thankfully, we have that option. So she went in the other barn, so not the main barn, but as we call it, the filly barn. And she ended up going in the last stall. There was nobody else around her. And that is where she got to do her quarantine. This picture that you're seeing here was during her fluid treatment. Don't worry about the rings around her eyes. That was SWAT that we had to put there. She was wearing a mask prior to this. And as soon as we took the mask off, the flies were just glomming to her. So we went ahead and put SWAT there. So that's what the rings are around her eyes. But as you can see, she's very like dumpy looking. She doesn't really care what's going on. Like, she doesn't even want the grass at this point. And you may even be able to see some of the remnants of the leakage of the diarrhea coming out from her behind on the toe. For those that don't know anything about colitis in horses, because I sure didn't, it's caused by a multitude of things: bacterial, viral, parasitical, and it can even be non-infectious, so like plants and toxic feed that they potentially consumed. Because we're unsure what she had, that's why she had to go into quarantine. The vet had given us a list of medications and supplements that day, along with a list of supplements and a script to have filled at the pharmacy of our choosing, because the medication on her that day was for 3 days. The medications and supplements she gave us were 4 tubes of 60cc biosponge. I'm going to butcher this, but 100 count of metrodenzol tablets, biosponge in powder form, and Banamine to give her orally 5 cc's 2 times a day for the next 2 days. The script was for the remaining metrodenzol tablets, and the remaining shopping list was for electrolytes, both tube and powder form, sand clear, chopped hay, a tube of Ulcerguard, and additional probiotics. So after the vet had left, we had gone ahead and got her started to get settled, just gave her a water bucket and some food. I had to go out with a shopping list, and on top of that, go get some bedding and whatnot too, because these are pasture horses. Like, my horses are pasture horses. They don't do stalls unless it shows, and even that's debatable. Shows or when something like this happens. So I had to go get stuff for her to finish stalling her and be able to stall her, like bedding. So once we got her all settled for the night, we had to go back and go deep clean the wash stall. Thankfully, we put her in the wash stall, so it was really easy to deep clean. Now, when I say the barn smelled like bleach for days, I mean it smelled like bleach for days. We scrubbed the floors, the walls, the stall mats, the buckets that were along the side and behind her. Even the hose itself, at that point, got a good scrub down, just to prevent possibly giving this to another horse, because, like I said, we don't know what strain she's got. Wednesday morning was the first day I went out for a round of meds and check in to see how much she ate or drank. Her temp that morning was 100.9. We noticed that she actually did drink a good amount of water. Her food intake, though, was to be desired. She just really wasn't that interested in the chopped hay. She was all about trying to go outside for grass, though, and I think just to get out of the stall in general. Wednesday night and Thursday morning were the same as far as water consumption and food. Her temp was also the same both times at 100.1. She still was not about that chopped hay at all. So Thursday morning, after I had finished chores, went ahead, came home to start getting ready for work myself. Doc texted me, said she could call in about 30 minutes, and that the CBC results were concerning. So we went ahead and went over it. Her red blood cells and her white blood cell count were both normal, and that's really just where the good ends in her CBC. She had 2 enzymes on her kidney that were elevated and leading towards acute kidney damage or even potentially kidney failure. Along with those 2, she had 3 liver enzymes showing this. At that point, I was to stop giving all Banamine, because if she's having problems with her organs, the Banamine is unfortunately just going to make it worse. She said to go ahead and just continue everything else and monitor for any sudden changes that might arise. By Friday morning, that's when I had started losing all hope. Her temp was literally the normal thing that I saw out there, and even that was barely, because it was just barely 99. She had hardly drank any water. She didn't touch any food. That night, I had picked grass too and put some of that in a bucket, just because that was the only thing she was interested in. She didn't touch that either. She also didn't touch her grain or even her salt lick that she was given, which is really odd for her because she really loves the salt lick. Like, of all things, she loves the salt licks. By that point, I had another hour and a half before the clinic opened, but I went ahead and I texted the clinic line, gave them the update, and the vet was like, I'll give you a call as soon as I'm in office. At that point, that was about 20 minutes or so from clinic opening. And we went ahead and started discussing some options. But they said ultimately, if she didn't start drinking and eating, and if I couldn't get her into a hospital, we'd be fighting a losing battle. They said even if I could get her into a hospital, if it is her kidneys, it's still a losing battle because unlike in humans, where we can potentially do transplants or run dialysis or whatever the case may be to help prolong and give a person a quality of life, that's not something that we can do in horses. We started having the difficult conversation that, again, if she does not get better, that we will be fighting a losing battle, and that there's a chance I may walk out to the barn and we will not find her alive out in her stall if it is kidney or liver failure. They did say that they could come out, but they had a couple calls lined up on the other side, so they probably couldn't get to me until about 1:30 in the afternoon at that point. And I said, let's go ahead, let's reschedule an appointment, let's get another CBC, let's see what we're dealing with. So they said, okay, we'll be there around 1:30. We'll call when we're on our way. We'll call or text when we're on our way. But just keep us monitored, keep us up to date if anything happens. Sometime after that phone call, the girls were coming through from doing farm chores, and they came by with the UTV that had some hay in the back of it. This was that point when I had Starr outside because it's the only time she wants to eat, right? Well, I might as well let her go, let her eat. And she saw the hay in the back, and she actually was interested in the hay, which I was surprised because she's shown no interest in this chopped hay. So we went ahead and we gave her some flakes of hay because at this point, I don't know what's going on. Something's got to be better than nothing. So we're going to go ahead and let her eat this hay and eat the grass because it's the only thing she wants to eat. Vets had shown up early afternoon. We had pulled more blood, checked her vitals, or some improvement at that time versus what I saw in the morning. She had some hydration back in her, according to her pinch and capillary test. Obviously, at that point, she'd been eating, so she's definitely perkier just for that alone. They went ahead and they re-examined her, and at that point, she was trying to nicely pull them out the barn to go get grass. So we had talked some, and definitely agreed that compared to Tuesday, she's definitely perkier than what she's been. If the CBC doesn't show improvement, which we're not expecting it to, there's a 10% chance that the CBC will show any improvement on her levels. And if there is no improvement, this would have been the third horse that the vets dealt with this year, just with a kidney issue. They said to go ahead and just, at this point, a calorie is a calorie, so if she wants to eat hay, she can eat hay. If she wants to eat sweet feet, she can eat sweet feet. Whatever we can get her to eat, she should eat. We also need to get her to take the sand clear and everything too, just so we can try and push out what's going on in there. They left saying, well, they're going to run the CBC in-house this time because they want answers today. Even though we're not expecting any improvement on the CBC, they said go ahead and call the clinic emergency line if we needed help during the weekend at all for anything. And we were officially allowed to make her an outside area, but she had to be by herself. So we ended up making her, I'll show it here. We ended up making her this temp pen. Thankfully, she's a horse that has always respected the fence, so we didn't even buy hot wire or a box to electrify it. We just did paracord, and we just did 2 rows of that. We had to put her separate, obviously, so she can be monitored for 1, and 2, because we couldn't officially clear if she was contagious or not. We weren't thinking she was, just based on the fact that she was in a pasture with 4 other horses, and none of them are showing symptoms of what she had. So the signs of her being infectious to another horse was very slim, but still possible. We'll say it was night and day difference from the morning to even early afternoon after the vets left versus how she looked and how she was acting. After the vets got back to the clinic, it was a little under 2 hours before we got the test results back. And honestly, to say that we were all shocked was an understatement. We weren't expecting them to do anything except stay the same or go up. Obviously, if they go up, that is definitely a sign that she's got kidney or liver failure, depending on what enzyme it was. And at that point, we were just going to be fighting a losing battle. They did say that there was a 10% chance that this is just colitis X, and unfortunately, everything had to get elevated before it all comes back down. After the doctor had texted me within those 2 hours and like, hey, really good news. Obviously, we're not out of the clear yet, but her red and white blood cell counts are still the same. Her kidney values are starting to stabilize. The creatine was normalized, and her bun was in the normal temp range, or in the normal range. Her beryllium was also coming down. I probably butchered that, but it was the news that we needed. Now, it didn't mean that we were in the clear 100%, but it definitely meant that we were on the right track. They stated once again that if we needed any help or any emergency services, go ahead and call the emergency line over the weekend, and someone could get out to us if need be. Otherwise, I was to send them an update Monday morning when the clinic opened. Throughout the weekend, we had kept temps pretty stable, anywhere from 99.9 to 100.5. She had also started averaging a bucket or more every 12 hours. Her stool even started returning to normal. We were given the all clear to just keep doing what we're doing, and as long as she continues on this track, and since she hasn't had any sign of a fever since the previous Tuesday, that once she finishes her final dose of the tablets, she can go outside. The final dose was the evening of July 31st. That Wednesday night, we were able to give her that final dose. We brought her up so she can eat her dinner, went and brushed out her tail, because as you've seen in the photos, like, I did a makeshift tail. I was also hoping that if I took her outside with Callie, that Callie would stand up for her like she has in the past. However, apparently that's not the case, and Callie was actually the biggest problem out in the pasture. She was the one running her around, squealing at her, and just doing all sorts of, like, this is a new horse, what are you doing here? Even though she really was only gone from the pasture for a week. Don't know what that was about. What makes matters worse is she's the smallest horse in the pasture, and she's the one that was taking charge of the herd and running the herd at her. Usually we call this little man syndrome, except we're going to call this little mare syndrome, as this thing stands for T2 at best. So as of today, which is the 10th of August, she's been back out in pasture for a week. She has absolutely no interest going back into a stall. I can't say I blame her. She's still a little bit on the loner side out there, but I have seen her with her pasture mates. Callie's still being a bag, but that's just the nature of Callie at this point. She's little mare syndrome, is just what we're going to call it. The doctor said to go ahead and she can start coming back into work as she sees fit, so we're starting with lunging and ponying. I like the ponying idea because maybe Callie will get her head out of her butt. Probably not, because it's Callie. Obviously, there's an age difference in those two as well. Starr definitely being on the older side. Like, she's not old, but she's not young, whereas Callie's still in her prime. But the doctor said go ahead, bring her back into work on her own terms, and we'll see what she says that we can do. Thankfully, during this time, she didn't lose too much body condition. She lost her top line and more in her rump area, rump and loin. But other than that, like, she really didn't lose too much. I've seen horses come out worse from worse things. But the plan is to pony her, like I said, and do some lunging and play with her on the ground, and that's the current plan. Thank you so much for watching today's video. I'm happy that there is a very happy ending to the very traumatic start and scary equine emergency that this had arisen into. But I'm going to go ahead and cut it here. Thank you all for watching and supporting the channel, and I hope to catch you all in the next video.